Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Damas e cavalheiros, buenos dias. Senhoras e senhores, bom dia. Welcome to the Humanitarian Demining Seminar. Bienvenidos al Seminario de Desminado Humanitário. Sejam todos bem-vindos ao Seminário de Desminagem Humanitária. We have simultaneous translation into English. Tenemos tradução simultânea al espanhol. Temos tradução simultânea para o português. Busque o canal de sua preferência ou em seu idioma. O link de acesso aos canais nos idiomas original, espanhol, inglês ou português encontram-se no e-mail de cadastro apresentado por ocasião da inscrição neste seminário. Apresento novamente as boas-vindas ao nosso Seminário de Desminagem Humanitária, uma iniciativa da Junta Interamericana de Defesa, a JID, e da Organização dos Estados Americanos, a OEA. Sou o coronel Marcos Lemco de Souza, do Exército Brasileiro, e desempenho as funções de chefe da Divisão de Serviços Técnicos e assessor de desminagem humanitária na Junta Interamericana de Defesa. Antes de iniciarmos esse seminário, passarei alguns avisos para facilitar o uso de nossas plataformas. Incentivamos a interação com os nossos palestrantes, empregando a ferramenta de chat do canal do YouTube. As perguntas apresentadas no chat serão repassadas à moderadora e aos palestrantes desse seminário. Em função do intervalo temporal destinado à apresentação de cada palestrante e às respectivas fases de debates, perguntas com conteúdos semelhantes poderão ser condensadas, buscando melhor aproveitamento do tempo disponibilizado. Maiores informações sobre este evento também poderão ser obtidas na página www.jid.org/eventos. Também queremos ouvir você. Apresente suas sugestões, críticas e observações para que possamos tornar este evento cada vez melhor. Sem mais demora, passo a palavra à senhora Tammy Hall, que é coordenadora do Programa de Ação Integral contra Minas Antipessoal da Organização dos Estados Americanos, e que no dia de hoje desempenhará o duplo papel de moderadora e palestrante do Seminário de Desminagem Humanitária. Tammy Hall, a palavra é sua.
Y estamos pues muy agradecidos de poder tocar ese tema hoy con ustedes de las normas internacionales. En la OEA pensamos que eso es el fundamento a toda la acción contra las minas. Entonces es un día muy importante, un evento muy importante para nosotros de presentar todo varios elementos de esas normas a ustedes hoy. Tengo el gran placer de iniciar nuestro programa con nuestro director del Departamento de Seguridad Pública, Steven Greiner. Steve, you have the floor.
Buenos días a todos. Estimados colegas, mi nombre es Steven Greiner y soy el director del Departamento de Seguridad Pública de la OEA, departamento en donde se encuentra el Programa de Acción Integral contra Minas Antipersonales de la Organización de los Estados Americanos. Es un honor darles la bienvenida a este seminario virtual titulado Explorando los Estándares Internacionales de Acción contra Minas, IMAS, Avances y Desafíos. Agradecemos su presencia y su compromiso con esta importante causa. Hoy nos reunimos con el propósito de profundizar en el conocimiento y la aplicación de los IMAS, estándares fundamentales que guían nuestras acciones contra minas, Estos estándares no solo representan las mejores prácticas globales, sino que también son esenciales para garantizar la seguridad, eficiencia y efectividad de nuestras operaciones. A lo largo del día tendremos el privilegio de escuchar a varios expertos internacionales que compartirán sus conocimientos y experiencias en la elaboración, utilización e interpretación de los IMAS. Comenzaremos con una introducción directamente del secretario de IMAS y luego exploraremos desde el marco de los estándares internacionales temas complejos como el de todo esfuerzo razonable y otros temas operacionales como la marcación de artefactos explosivos y las competencias necesarias para la liberación de tierras. Finalmente abordaremos temas claves como la asistencia a víctimas. Antes de comenzar el evento, me gustaría expresar nuestro agradecimiento a las organizaciones participantes, comenzando con nuestro coorganizador, la Junta Interamericana de Defensa, el Centro Internacional de Desminado Humanitario en Ginebra, la Ayuda Popular Noruega y Humanity and Inclusion. Su apoyo y colaboración son fundamentales para el avance de nuestras metas comunes. Este seminario no solo es una oportunidad para adquirir conocimientos valiosos, sino también para fortalecer nuestras redes de colaboración y fomentar un intercambio de ideas que nos permita mejorar nuestras prácticas y estrategias en el campo. Les invito a participar activamente en las sesiones, compartir sus preguntas y experiencias y aprovechar al máximo esta oportunidad de aprendizaje conjunto. Una vez más, bienvenidos y espero que encuentren este seminario enriquecedor y productivo. Muchas gracias.
Tengo el honor de presentar el general Antonio Álvarez Reyes, presidente del Consejo de Delegados de la Junta Interamericana de Defensa. General, tiene la palabra.
Muchas gracias, muy buenos días a todos. Un saludo desde la Casa del Soldado, instalaciones de la Junta Interamericana de Defensa. Señor Steve Greiner, director del Departamento de Seguridad Pública de la Secretaría de Seguridad Multidimensional de la Universidad de Estados Americanos. Señora Tammy Hall, coordinadora general del programa y moderadora y ponente de este evento. Distinguidos oradores y honorable auditorio que nos acompañan virtualmente. En nombre del liderazgo de la Junta Interamericana de Defensa, del señor Brigadeiro Flavio Luis de Oliveira de la Fuerza Aérea de Brasil, director de la Secretaría General de la Junta Interamericana, de Michael Richard Heikam, director del Colegio Interamericano de Defensa, y el mío propio. Les doy la más cordial bienvenida y les envío un afectuoso saludo en nombre de todas las mujeres y hombres que integramos la Junta Interamericana de Defensa. Les agradecemos su participación en este seminario de Desminado Humanitario, el cual se constituye en un espacio de intercambio de conocimientos y experiencias regionales y globales en este tema. Este foro virtual representa la conjunción de voluntad y capacidades cívico-militares con la Organización de los Estados Americanos, dentro de un plan de trabajo que busca unir y complementar esfuerzos para promover la seguridad y evitar el uso de estos implementos en contra de la vida diaria en diversas regiones de nuestro mundo, de quienes tienen esta constante amenaza, lo cual reafirma el compromiso de esta organización internacional en la implementación de actividades de desminado humanitario, causa que refrendamos con empeño, dedicación y compromiso. En este evento tendrán la oportunidad de abordar temas relativos a las normas internacionales para la acción contra minas, IMAS, tales como los procedimientos relacionados con su desarrollo, sus competencias, lo relativo a la marcación de artefactos explosivos, la asistencia a víctimas y la nota técnica 071103, sobre todo esfuerzo razonable, lo cual se encuentra dirigido a la comprensión, percepción y voluntad de acción en el plano estratégico, operacional y táctico de los sectores gubernamentales y de la iniciativa privada de nuestro entorno global. En ello, la Junta Interamericana de Defensa como entidad militar de la Organización de Estados Americanos cuenta con una amplia experiencia en esta cooperación multilateral. Asimismo, posee un sólido historial de más de 30 años actuando en actividades de desminado humanitario. Desde 1991, participamos en proyectos que buscan eliminar el uso de minas terrestres y otros artefactos explosivos, así como contribuir significativamente a la seguridad y el bienestar de las poblaciones de nuestro entorno global y del continente americano. Este seminario reúne a expertos y líderes de distintas regiones, a quienes agradezco su integración y quienes comparten un compromiso común con la paz, la estabilidad mundial y la del continente americano. Deseamos que este seminario sea un catalizador para un diálogo productivo y la identificación de mejores prácticas en este contexto. Asimismo, hará evidente la oportunidad única para compartir lecciones aprendidas, avances, dialogar sobre desafíos y alcanzar fortalezas conjuntas simultáneamente en esta colaboración. Agradecemos una vez más a todos los que hoy se integran a nosotros en este foro. Juntos continuaremos trabajando para generar y fortalecer un clima de estabilidad, paz, desarrollo y democracia que priva a nuestro continente y por un mundo más seguro y libre de minas antipersonal. Les invito a participar activamente y compartir sus conocimientos y experiencias, ya que en conjunto tendemos a fortalecer la seguridad y la cooperación en nuestros países. Les deseo mucho éxito a todos nuestros panelistas y oradores, quienes nos guiarán a través de estos temas y quienes tienen en la JID y en el Colegio Interamericano de Defensa una alianza para preservar la confianza y la seguridad hemisférica. Bienvenidos a este seminario, a este encuentro y que sea muy exitoso. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, General, para esas palabras de motivación y también le agradezco mucho de estar aquí con nosotros. Ahora vamos a continuar con el programa, entrando en el contenido de nuestro webinar. Vamos a empezar con una presentación general sobre las normas internacionales. Es mi placer de introducir un antiguo colega mía, el secretario de los IMAS, Sasha Logi. Sasha ha trabajado los últimos años en el Centro Internacional del Desminado Humanitario de Ginebra, trabajando con el tema de normas y ahora está el secretario de los IMAS. Él va a explicar su papel en esa función. Ha trabajado en el pasado para las Naciones Unidas, UNMAS, en países como Palestina. Entonces, ahora es mi placer de presentar a Sasha. Por favor, Sasha, tiene la palabra.
Good morning. Thank you very much for that very kind introduction. I'd like to thank in particular the Organization of American States, as well as the Inter-American Defense Board for organizing this important seminar. It is a very significant and key development in IMAS that we now have more than 20 of our international mine action standards translated into Spanish. And I hope this will help the facilitation and use of the international mine action standards within Spanish-speaking countries. I will just now share my screen. As Tammy mentioned, my name is Sasha Logie, and I work at the Geneva International Center for Humanitarian, based here in Switzerland. So greetings from Switzerland. My job, my function is the IMAS secretary. And that means that what that means is that I work very closely with the governance bodies within the IMAS framework to maintain and update the international mine action standards to ensure that they are fit for purpose and to serve all of you who are working in mine action programs. If I may briefly describe what the international mine action standards are, colleagues have already described them, but I'd like to use a little analogy, if I may, to describe them. You will often hear the international mine action framework described as the toolbox, and the individual international mine action standard documents are described as the tools within that toolbox for how to do safe, effective, and efficient mine action operations. So these tools are used by explosive ordnance affected countries, for example, to meet, if they are signatories to the mine action related treaties, to meet their treaty obligations. And they are used to ensure that the mine action programs and operations that they do support the communities and those living at risk of explosive ordnance. And these tools are also used by the operators, whether they be within government structures or whether they be INGOs or national NGOs, again, to ensure safe, effective, and efficient mine action operations. Currently, we have 78 documents within the IMAS framework, 78 tools, and they cover all aspects of mine action operations. So they cover management topics such as risk management, quality management, information management. They also cover key concepts to the mine action sector, such as land release. They cover how to mark minefields. They cover all aspects of mine action operations. They also cover and set out competencies required to undertake key mine action functions. And so, for example, they cover the competencies required to do explosive ordnance disposal and improvised explosive device disposal. I shan't speak too much further about the content of the IMAS because the speakers that will follow me in this seminar, this important seminar, will go into a bit more detail into various topics of the IMAS. In my presentation, in my few minutes I have to speak to you, I'd like to talk a little bit about the IMAS structure, to talk about the governance structure, and also talk a little bit about IMAS processes. So how are these standards updated, maintained, and written? First of all, IMAS structure. The first thing I'd like to emphasize is that the UN has ownership and stewardship. They are responsible for the international mine action standards. And this is embedded within a General Assembly resolution. So for example, every second year, there's a General Assembly resolution on assistance in mine action, which states and encourages efforts to conduct all mine action activities in accordance with the international mine action standards, as well as national standards compliant with those standards. IMAS are also embedded within the language of 3 international humanitarian law instruments. So there are 3 conventions that cover mine action. The first of those is the Anti-Personal Mine Ban Convention. The second is the Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons, in particular Protocol 2 and Protocol 5. And thirdly, the Convention on Cluster Munitions. And convention documents all include and encourage the use of IMAS when conducting mine action activities. So what I'd like to emphasize here is that IMAS don't exist in isolation. They are very much embedded within UN resolutions and conventions. How does the UN exercise its ownership and governance of IMAS? It does so by convening 3 bodies within the IMAS governance structure. The first of these is called the UN's Interagency Coordination Group for Mine Action. This is a body of 12 UN agencies who work in the mine action area. And at the highest level, at the director level, the UN Interagency Coordination Group for Mine Action endorses new and updated IMAS documents. The second body is called the IMAS Steering Group, again, chaired by the UN and in particular, UN Mine Action Service. And this group is responsible for strategic oversight and governance of the IMAS framework. And the third body is called the IMAS Review Board. And the Review Board is tasked with the responsibility for the technical content and updating and upkeeping and writing of standards to ensure that they are fit for purpose. So this is the general structure and that governs IMAS. In terms of IMAS development, the first thing to note is that this is a really what might be described as a sector-wide participation process. So it is not just the UN that writes these documents, but it is the sector more broadly that has this responsibility. What does that mean in practice? Well, the IMAS Review Board, which I mentioned is responsible for the technical content of IMAS, consists of 29 member organizations. And these 29 member organizations really represent the mine action sector globally. So for example, it includes governments of explosive ordnance and mine affected countries. So Colombia, for example, within your region is part of the IMAS Review Board. It includes international organizations. So the Organization of American States is also one of the members of the Review Board. The membership includes UN agencies, 5 UN agencies who work in mine action. It includes international operators, so international NGOs. Two colleagues will speak later from NPA and Humanity and Inclusion, who are part of the Review Board. And it also includes private sector, military, universities. So it is a sort of, I hope you can see that it's a sort of broad representation of the sector. Secondly, IMAS is developed according to the needs of mine action actors. So they are developed according to the practical day-to-day needs of operators and governments working in mine action. How is this done in practice? Well, first of all, the fact that we have such a broad representative review board ensures that issues related to IMAS are brought from the review board itself. But secondly, anyone within the sector can raise issues to the IMAS review board, to request updates to IMAS, to propose new IMAS. So it is a sector-wide process that really addresses the needs of operators on the ground. IMAS are drafted according to standardized procedures and processes. These are set out in our first IMAS, IMAS 110, and they are agreed within the review board, but also within the steering group. And this process, these very regimented processes ensure transparency and accountability within the framework. And those processes are also based on internationally recognized best practice. So the IMAS are managed and drafted according to the International Standardization Organization, the ISO template and process. If you would like, and I encourage you to do so, to read the standards and to explore the standards, please visit the website that you see on the screen there. It is www.mineactionstandards.org. And there, by clicking on the standards button on the top right, you will be able to access all of the standards for free. They're openly available. And you'll also now be able, I'm very happy to say, as of last week, be able to access all the newly translated into Spanish IMAS documents. I'd like to conclude by just thanking and recognizing the work that was done by the Organization of American States and the Inter-American Defense Board in translating IMAS. We know IMAS have existed for over 20 years, and we know just how much effort and work goes into translating these documents to make sure that they are usable and user-friendly and accurate translations of the English version. So I'd just like to commend that work and to express my thanks for the contribution that we hope this will make to mine action operations in Spanish-speaking countries. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you for your time. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Sasha, for that presentation. Very clear presentation. We have a couple of questions up on the board for you. So perhaps we can take a few minutes now. We have 10 minutes for questions. You explained a little bit already about the IMAS architecture and structures. The question is, in development or updating of IMAS, how are the current and past demining actors consulted to consider their experience and lessons learned? And how do they contribute to this process?
Thank you for that question, Tammy. And it's a very good question. So first of all, I mean, I've already mentioned this, but the IMAS Review Board is a broad representation of the IMAS sector. So as I mentioned, there are 29 members. So already within the governance structure within the IMAS Review Board, we have a lot of technical expertise and lessons learned that we can draw from. So for example, we have 7 international NGOs, the NPA, HALO, and others who bring a lot of experience. The second thing is I'd like to mention is that when an IMAS is written or when an IMAS is reviewed and updated, the IMAS Review Board create technical working groups to work on a particular IMAS. And in that process, in doing so, it invites the technical expert from the member organizations of the review board to join a technical working group. So to give you a concrete example, one of the IMAS that is currently being updated is the IMAS on environmental management and climate change in mine action. So as part of that technical working group, the environment experts from the member organization came together to draft the IMAS. The technical working group membership isn't just limited though, however, to review board members, but is open also to others within the sector who may not be on the review board, but can offer expertise to that process. And so, for example, in that technical working group, they're also outside experts to the process. I hope that answers the question.
Thanks, Sasha. That was, I think, a very good answer. Maybe I can move along to a next question for you, if that's okay. Can you tell us, has the implementation of artificial intelligence and other such technologies or equipment been considered in the development of standards?
Thank you for that question. Artificial intelligence and other new technologies such as drones are very much part of mine action. They are being innovated. Innovation in these areas is ongoing, and trials and ways of using this new technology to improve effective efficiency and safety of mine action are ongoing. At this stage, they haven't been brought in, such topics haven't been brought into IMAS. And I think that is because it is still quite early in the, if you like, the R&D, the research and development phase of those technologies. Some are more advanced than others. But I think at the point where the review board feels that such methodologies are understood and have been trialed and tested enough to be standardized into IMAS, that is likely to happen. But as of now, currently, AI, it hasn't been incorporated into the IMAS framework.
Great, thank you for that. And I know things are changing all the time. I wanted to ask if you could tell us a few words about what the new things that are being developed at the moment are in the review board. What new standards can people expect to see in the next coming months?
Thank you for that. And well, first of all, Jonathan Guthrie, who's the latest speaker in the seminar, I think will speak more about this, but one of the recent areas of development in IMAS is standardizing competencies, the various functions, jobs that exist in mine action programs. So I mentioned in my presentation that IMAS covers explosive ordnance disposal. We're all familiar with EOD 1, 2, 3 qualifications. That's within IMAS. But further work has been done and is being done to standardize other competency areas. And so one of the competency standards that will be coming out shortly is competency related to non-technical survey, which is one of the key activities within the land release process. But I'll stop there so Jonathan Guthrie can speak more on that. Another one, and I mentioned it also briefly, is the IMAS on environmental management and climate change. There is an existing IMAS on this, but quite a big revision, quite a major revision of that IMAS is ongoing. And as not just within the mine action sector, but globally, there's a lot more understanding and importance of the consideration of environmental and climate change with all aspects of life. That is also the case in mine action and in the IMAS. So we hope that in a few months, we'll be able to publish a new IMAS to cover this area. So I think those are two of the more sort of interesting and relevant standards that will be coming out shortly.
Great. Thank you so much, Sasha. I'm wondering if you have any concluding remarks for us as we wrap up this first topic.
Nothing other than really just to thank you once again for this opportunity and to once again recognize the importance for us as a sector, but I hope for the South America and the Spanish-speaking world for the translation of IMAS into Spanish. I think this is going to be a really useful resource for those governments and organizations working in those areas. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Sasha, for your continued stewardship of the IMAS Secretariat. It's been a real pleasure working with you. I will make a small note that in terms of the Spanish versions of the IMAS that are online, we did notice there were a couple of formatting problems which we'll be working out in the next day or so. We sort of rushed to get them online, but we'll make sure that with Sasha, we work that out in the next coming days. So thank you again, Sasha.
Thank you.
And now queremos mudar a ver en nuestro próximo tema. Vamos a entrar en el contenido de los capítulos de IMAS. En este sentido, vamos a empezar con un asunto sumamente técnico. Y tenemos realmente el placer de tener con nosotros Jonathan Guthrie, que es director de operaciones globales no solamente para acción contra minas, pero también para desarme de APN, una ONG de Noruega que forma parte del Review Board de los IMAS y que está muy activo y que está liderando en ese momento el desarrollo de competencias en el sector. Gus, can I give the floor to you, please, and start us off on looking at mine action competencies.
Thank you very much, Tammy. And thank you very much to everybody for giving me the opportunity to speak on behalf of the technical working groups that are working on developing the new competencies for within IMAS. And a special thank you to Sasha for not taking too many points from my presentation during the previous session. As mentioned, my name is Jonathan Guthrie, and I am the Global Director of Operations for Norwegian People's Aid. And as also mentioned in the introduction, I am leading the technical working groups on competencies currently, and previously have been a member of the technical working groups working on competencies for explosive ordnance detection. Or explosive ordnance disposal. I'll just need to share my screen. Yeah, thank you very much. So I think the first question is why? Why do we need to standardize competencies across the sector? What is the need to do this? And first and foremost is to ensure standardization across the sector. With the sector growing, and we're seeing the movement of people and staff moving from one program to another, and bringing different sets of standards and different levels of training from one mine action program to another. We saw the need that the sector needed to standardize across the sector. A good example of this could be a deminer has a certificate stating that he's a deminer in, say, Sri Lanka, where many of the demining activities there do not use mine detectors, but they use a raking methodology. And although they may have a certificate that says that they're a deminer, when moving into another mine action program, could be missing some of the competencies required to use various detection systems as a deminer in the new country. So the idea is that we would standardize across the sector so that national mine action authorities and organizations can then build from this standardization and set their own standards for their own country. And then that leads me on to the next point. It's a minimum standard. So within the IMAS review boards and the technical working groups, we have decided that we are not looking to try to set the maximum standard. We want to set the minimum standard that can be achieved across most mine action programs. And then again, that leaves scope for organizations and countries to then develop standards of which are greater in needs and requirements than are set in the IMAS. So the IMAS is there as a guide to establish the minimum standard and standardize across the globe. The third point is that explosive ordnance disposal, or EOD, has been the baseline for mine action for many, many years. Explosive ordnance disposal is just one activity within mine action, and the explosive ordnance disposal competencies within IMAS don't detail other roles and responsibilities within mine action and within the land release process. Also, because the explosive ordnance disposal was the only baseline or the only reference of competencies in IMAS, it was sometimes being translated that explosive EOD level 1 would mean a deminer, EOD level 2 would mean a team leader, and EOD level 3 would mean a supervisor or operations manager. And we saw that within the IMAS review board that doesn't adequately transcribe or cross over equal competencies for those roles. A deminer doesn't necessarily need to be an explosive ordnance disposal level 1 qualification. So we saw that there was a need to be able to develop competencies that actually reflect some of the activities that we conduct within mine action. So in May 2021, the IMAS review board agreed to establish competencies for other roles within mine action. And this involved the establishment of various technical working groups. As Sasha has previously mentioned, the technical working groups are established first and foremost by interested members of the review board or people within the organizations that are members of the review board. But in addition, we invite external parties, other national authorities, and other interested parties that can contribute to the technical working group. As an example, for explosive ordnance disposal competencies revision, we reached out to various EOD training schools around the globe so that they could contribute to that working group. And again, we're also looking at other working groups where we bring other expertise in from outside of the review board to ensure that the working group is establishing a set of competencies that is not only just suitable for the role, but internationally recognized. So what do we have? At the moment, explosive ordnance disposal. It has been reviewed in February 2022. There were some significant changes made. EOD was already a set of competencies within the IMAS, and there were some significant changes specifically to the EOD level 2, whereby previously EOD level 2 qualified personnel were able to conduct explosive ordnance disposal anywhere without written authority by an EOD level 3. This has now changed, and an EOD level 2 that is conducting explosive ordnance disposal in what we call an uncontrolled area, so areas outside of a demining site or a technical survey area, battle area clearance, or a range, areas outside of those, the EOD level 2 person would need written authority by a level 3 person to conduct their demolition. EOD level 3 has also changed. Previously, EOD level 3 covered render safe procedures, bulk demolitions, and also bulk demolitions up to 50 kilos, and also disposal of large aircraft bombs. The disposal of large aircraft bombs has now been removed and is now an EOD level 3 plus competency. So in order to be deemed qualified to be able to do large aircraft bombs, you now need to do the extra plus module on top of an EOD level 3. Improvised explosive ordnance disposal, IED disposal, again, was approved in February 2022. And again, this one was designed and built on from the previous set, which was in 2019. And it's basically just brought that set of competencies up in line with the changes that were designed in the or agreed upon within the explosive ordnance disposal revision. But as mentioned, in 2021, the review board had decided that we were going to look at other sets of competencies that had not previously been in the IMAS. Animal detection systems handlers, team leaders, and instructors were developed and approved in November 2022. And these cover all of the competencies for those 3 positions within those organizations and mine action programs where we use animal detection systems, most commonly mine detection dogs and mine detection rats. In June 2023, we had competencies approved for the positions of deminer, battle area clearance operator, team leader, and supervisor. And this is basically the core of the mine action operations in almost every mine action program. There was a need for these competencies, and it was seen by the IMAS review board. It was approved in June 2023, and is now being adopted. Again, it's the minimum standard for these positions, and national mine action authorities can use that as a baseline to set potentially greater requirements if needed. What's ongoing at the moment is non-technical surveyors and team leaders, as Sasha mentioned. This working group is almost finished. A draft was presented to the review board last month, and has been sent back to the working group for some minor adjustments before hopefully being approved later in the year. So that working group is almost coming to completion, and I'm confident that we will see it approved before the end of 2024. And the future, following the non-technical survey competencies, we're going to be looking at mechanical operations and supervisors, and also looking at explosive ordnance risk education instructors. That's what's in the work plan at the moment. When we finish or complete these competencies, we may sit within the review board, evaluate where we are, and see if there is a need for further competencies to be outlined within the IMAS structure. So that is an overview of the competencies within IMAS, where we are at the moment and where we've come from, and I welcome any questions from the audience. Again, thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Gus, for that presentation. I think that the competencies are one of the most important developments in IMAS in the last 5 years, to be quite honest. It's the basis of training, and which is the beginning of ensuring quality, really, in the process, I think. Let's start off with a couple of questions for you, if you're okay with that. There was one interesting question, I think, and I'll be interested to hear your response to it. Has there been any thought given in the review board to unifying or standardizing concepts that exist in NATO procedures, in particular with the doctrine, the STANAG doctrine?
Not discussed. Well, it was discussed during the explosive ordnance disposal working group, but decided that within the group that we would not go down that road, because the needs for the mine action sector are slightly different. Rather than military competencies, these are competencies that align more with humanitarian demining activities. And outside of that, no, there hasn't been any consideration for aligning our competencies with any international groups such as NATO and STANAG.
Thanks, Gus. Yes, I think it's very important to highlight that there are different objectives for these standards, that the military objective is very different than what we see in humanitarian standards, hence the need to develop them in the first place, I suppose. So no, I appreciate that response very much. I think it's important to make the differentiation for sure, even though we realize there are technical elements that will cross over between them, obviously. There's another question about looking at information sharing, and if there are any suggestions about information sharing in terms of training of EOD operators and IED operators, really between countries. This was raised by Colombia, thinking about other countries, developments in Mexico with some of the cartels, with new ways of developing devices. Do you have anything to contribute in terms of how information is being shared globally on some of these issues?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and especially when it comes to improvised explosive devices, it's a bit sensitive. With sharing information and ensuring that information that is shared is controlled. Yeah, there's not really within the humanitarian mine action sector, not so much, but there are different groups and think tanks that do maintain databases. Small Arms Survey, for example, collects information on the movement of improvised explosive ordnance components across countries. There are other think tanks around the globe that look at how we can share experiences. I think the best way, though, is for countries, national authorities, militaries to be able to share with one another. The Spanish-speaking countries can certainly get together and share experiences and share competencies, share training curriculums, etc., on what has been successful and what has not been successful within those countries. And if we take it down to a regional level, you'll probably see a bit more success in sharing information. So I don't think there's anything out there globally that I can highlight immediately, but I think definitely encouraging countries to get together and share experiences in forums such as this, where we can actually share experiences and details and learn from one another.
Great, thank you. That may be a role for the OAS in the future, perhaps, to get together an information sharing forum between technicians in the region. So thank you for that idea, Gus. I'm wondering if we know that there's survey, non-technical survey competencies that will be coming out shortly. What do you see as some future competencies that the review board may be working on as time goes forward?
Yeah, as mentioned, we're looking at explosive ordnance risk education trainers and potentially train the trainers as well. When it comes to risk education, we're looking at a different skill set. You need to be able to not just go and collect information, but you need to be able to deliver messages and deliver it in such a way that it can be absorbed by the audience. So it will be a completely different set of skill sets and competencies, I think, that are going to be mapped out within that working group. Yeah, we're looking at, as I mentioned, machine operators and supervisors. I think probably the next on the lineup would quite often be will probably be drone operators, because we're looking at UAVs are being used more and more in humanitarian mine action. I'm just sitting in Cambodia at a conference right now where we've been talking about this, and the use of UAVs across the Middle East and in Ukraine at the moment is quite extensive. And I think us as a sector, although it is governed under another sector, we need to see how that's adopted and what set of competencies we would require within humanitarian mine action. So that could potentially be another one that might be coming up in the near future.
Okay, thank you for that. And I guess as technology evolves, obviously, so will the competencies, and UAVs or drones are one good example of that. I have another question that's just popped up about how to know when a training complies or conforms with the IMAS criteria. We often in the sector get a lot of questions about certification of training and so on. Maybe you could say a few words about that. How can people ensure that that their training is high quality and conforms to IMAS standards?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I mean, we are a sector that kind of self-certifies ourselves, and I think the best way to do that, or at least the approach that Norwegian People's Aid has taken, is that when the new competencies come out, we redesign our course to match those competencies, and we have what we call our competency scaler, which is basically a matrix that links each of the competencies within IMAS and shows and maps out where they're being taught within the course that's being delivered, and that ensures that that's auditable. You can audit that. Somebody can come back and have a look at our training course, our curricula, and see that it's actually matching all of the competencies because we've actually mapped it out that way. And that scaler then is attached to ensuring that you don't just give certificates, but give a course report that clearly states exactly what has been taught and to what level. And then we also attach this scaler so that the individual that has been trained has a record of not only a certificate saying that they're certified, has a course report that clearly outlines everything that was taught on the course, but then also has the scaler that can actually link and be audited and can prove that the individual has been trained to IMAS competencies.
Thank you, Gus. That's an excellent point. I think more and more we find people who are moving from different countries, who start in a mine-affected country, their own country, and move to other countries. It's important that we are very rigorous on the documentation of what these courses contain, especially since, of course, the national authority always has the oversight on what the content is ultimately. So yeah, that's a very important point, this documentation as people move between countries. Yeah, that's an excellent point. So just to ask you perhaps if you have any concluding remarks now. I think we're to the end of the segment. I think this is a really fascinating and important topic. It can seem a bit boring to some people, I think, but I think it's, as I said, the fundamental structure upon which mine action sits are the competencies of the different people who are doing the work on the ground. So I'm just wondering if you could have any last thoughts for us as we close off.
No last thoughts really, but just to echo exactly what you just mentioned, Tammy. I mean, this is the foundation of the work that we do, and it's probably long overdue within the IMAS. One of the toughest issues that arise when it comes to updating IMAS is the IMAS gets updated and it's difficult to roll it out across the globe to different countries in different languages. Now that we have IMAS that's been translated into Spanish, I highly encourage all those mine-affected countries, all those countries in the Spanish-speaking world to be able to adopt these. And as the new competencies come out, take them on board, have a look at your training curricula and your own training standards, and see where it can be where you can align with IMAS as the minimum standard.
All that remains, I guess, now, Gus, is to thank you so much for coming today. You have such a long experience in the sector, and we really appreciate you coming to present firsthand the competencies that you yourself have been working on in the IMAS Technical Working Group. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Y ahora vamos a continuar con el próximo tema. Es un capítulo de IMAS que ha sido cambiado recientemente. Salió hace poco tiempo. Es la marcación de artefactos explosivos. Y ahora tengo el placer de presentar a Lionel Pechera, que está con nosotros de Ginebra también, del Centro Internacional de Desminado Humanitario de Ginebra, que ha sido íntimamente involucrado en desarrollar este documento. Ha tenido una larga experiencia también en el trabajo de acción contra las minas, en particular técnicamente en todo que está relacionado a artefactos improvisados en países como Senegal, también en Mali y otros países alrededor del mundo. Ahora te doy la palabra, Lionel, para presentarnos IMAS sobre marcación. Tienes la palabra.
Thank you very much, Amy, for the introduction. I hope you can hear me. Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you now. Please
Oh,
go ahead.
excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me to present on the IMAS 840 on marking. I'm going to share a short presentation that will help me to follow a few points. I hope it's visible. I'm not sure.
Yes, we have it visually, Lionel. No problem.
Okay. Is it in presentation mode?
Not yet.
Okay, so hopefully it should be in presentation mode.
We're still seeing the other mode.
Okay. It should be fine now.
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
No. If you have two screens, that sometimes can be a problem. I'm not sure if you do, but
Yes, I do. Anyway, the slides are not too heavy, and let's not waste time on the technical issues.
okay, we can see it fine now. You've got a bigger slide in the middle, so that's perfect.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. So the International Mine Action Standards 840 on marking explosive ordnance hazardous areas. The third edition of it was endorsed by the Interagency Coordination Group for Mine Action in January 23. The revision of that standard happened in 2022. What is important when reading a standard is to look at the scope. And here I wanted to highlight a specific point, which is a big change compared to the previous version. This marking is clearly intending to warn civilians and to prevent them from approaching explosive ordnance hazards or entering suspected and confirmed hazardous areas. So I think that here we can understand that this mine action standards focuses on the expected result. What is this marking intended for? And what we'll find in that mine action standards is that insistence on the effect rather than the technical aspects of the marking itself, which was not easy when revising that standard. Why that? When you look at conventions, including the Anti-Personal Mine Bind Convention, there are very few technical details, except for marking. So the idea was to allow national mine action authorities and operators to find ways to conform with treaties while focusing on the effect and especially on the protection of the population. So this is what we can see here. It switched from a technical or asset-based approach in the form that, oh, you need that many poles, this is how the wires should look like, this is the size, the shape of the panels, etc., etc. It's switched from that focus to an effect-based approach. So here, what matters is the effectiveness. So it gives more space for national mine action authorities to adjust their national mine action standards to the specificities of each country. So, for example, on the picture, you can see a very specific context. And this by taking into account several factors. One, the cost and sustainability of the marking. So here, in addition to effectiveness, we have a relation to the efficiency. That is to say, how much resources you should put into the marking to achieve an effect. Again, preventing the population from entering areas that have been identified as being hazardous. And then, of course, environmental conditions. So, for example, in the previous version, you could find recommendation to build physical barriers, including ditches, but the problem is that in certain contexts, environments, if you dig ditches, it will have a detrimental effect on that very local environment. So that new version, that new edition of the International Mine Action Standards insists on these aspects and gives more space for national authorities to develop adjusted national mine action standards. In terms of effectiveness, the technical working group also worked on two aspects. When the marking should be emplaced and until when. The second question, in general terms, is easy to answer. So until such a time a suspected hazardous area or a confirmed hazardous area has been released through cancellation, reduction, or clearance, you should keep the marking installed and remove it only after the land is being accepted as released by the National Mine Action Authority. Now the question is when emplacing marking. And to be frank, the technical working group could come at best with as soon as possible. This is an aspect I would like to insist on. When developing national mine action standards, it's very important to clarify when, at which stage you expect the marking to be installed and by who. That is to say, for example, answering easy questions like who should install the marking? Should it be the mine action operators which identified the hazardous area, or should it be another body, such as the Mine Action Center? In some cases, this is the option that was chosen. And well, should it be done as soon as, for example, a non-technical survey team has identified the hazardous area, or should it be done after the report has been accepted by the Mine Action Center and the area has been entered as suspected or confirmed hazardous area into the database? So I'm just drawing your attention on the importance of clarifying these points when developing national standards. Another change when comparing the former version and the new edition is the number of requirements. So here from that table, you can see that the number of requirements in that new standards has augmented. So for example, instead of having 22 requirements, there are 56 requirements. So this can be sound as a paradox because, as I explained, the idea is to give national mine action authorities more space to adjust requirements for marking to the local context, to the local environment, to the available resources. However, this new edition links marking with other topics. For example, it links marking with risk management, which is already covered by other mine action standards. It also links in a clearer manner marking with quality management, including long-term quality management. This explains the higher number of requirements. This new edition also insists or clarifies the responsibilities between the National Mine Action Authority, the mine action operators, and the communities. In the previous version, a lot of things were transferred, a lot of responsibility were transferred to the mine action operators, especially the maintenance, the long-term maintenance of the marking, which from experience in different countries was seen as an issue. First, mine action operators may not necessarily operate in a given country in the long term. Second problem that was seen in the previous version was the responsibility transferred to the communities. For example, in the previous version, the communities were responsible for the maintenance of the marking. However, this can create some risks and do harm to the local communities. They are not trained to maintain marking. They are not trained for that. So the idea was to put things in order. And what I can say to summarize the point is that responsibilities have been redirected to the National Mine Action Authority. Another change in the new edition is related to the vocabulary, terms and definitions. So on the table, I will summarize it, but in the previous version, you had 6 terms and definitions about marking, marking system, hazard marking system, permanent marking system, mine sign, hazard signs. This has been reduced to only 3 terms and definitions: an explosive ordnance sign, explosive ordnance marking, and explosive ordnance boundary marker. This also takes into account another change. The previous version was insisting on temporary and permanent marking. As I already said, that new edition insists on the effectiveness and long-term effectiveness, or we can say it differently, effectiveness until such a point that hazardous area can be released. So this new IMAS, instead of insisting on temporary and permanent marking system, rather insist on what the National Mine Action authorities and operators shall take into account to make the marking durable. And these are the main points I can mention about this new edition of the IMAS 840, and I can take some questions now.
Thank you very much, Lionel, for that presentation. To the point, I think, and I would encourage, obviously, everyone to read the actual document, so which has not yet been translated by us, but we have a list of documents that will be translated in the very near future, and that one is definitely on the list. I'd like to begin with a question. It's something that you started off with, I think, which is, in terms of the marking of explosive ordnance, what is the maximum time that is established to destroy the ordnance that has been marked, taking into account that various factors may be impeding the destruction of explosive ordnance?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. So maybe here I should clarify a point, and that's a very interesting question. Here, when we speak about the marking of explosive ordnance, we are actually speaking about marking of explosive ordnance hazards, actually referring to the areas and not to the items, to the explosive ordnance items. So this is something we wanted to make clear within the scope. The other confusion, and we will need to look at other IMAS documents. So what we're speaking about in that IMAS here is the perimeter of the hazardous areas, how to prevent the entry of civilians, right, or population at large. It does not deal with the marking within the site, within the demining site or technical survey sites. I just wanted to confirm that. Now to answer the question, actually marking of explosive ordnance areas give you time, or can give you time. But what is important between the moments you identify a hazardous area and the moment you release it through cancellation, through reduction, or through clearance, is to make sure that population will not enter and that there will not be accidents. And this is what we want to insist on. Make your marking effective, enough to make sure that the population is warned, but also make sure that through time, the marking keeps that effectiveness. So of course, the sooner you you will send technical survey clearance assets, the sooner you can remove the marking. But I would say that the marking give you maybe could be seen as giving you more time to deal with hazardous areas, and will help you to prioritize your technical work on these hazardous areas, while not putting the life of the population at undue risk.
Thank you very much for that, Lionel. I have another question that's come up on our board. If you could maybe say a few words about how the characteristics of the area and the actual explosive ordnance itself may have an effect on marking those items.
So the characteristic of the area, maybe I can start here. We have taken into account several factors. One factor is the cost. Marking is as a cost, and sometimes it is an obstacle. And we worked on specific examples. One example I can give you on another continent is Chad. Chad is desertic, flat, and you have huge minefields. And the movements, not only of populations, but also of animals, including livestock, which is semi-wild, such as camels, all of that comes into account. So, for example, in the case of Chad, the putting wires is just not affordable. It would cost too much. So they developed a system with wooden pickets, which like a walking person can see. But they also factored for another environmental consideration, which is camels. And actually, most of the accidents are with camels. And we need to understand that it's a way of winning bread, a camel, for many communities and families. So they just know part of the standards. They are also emplacing pickets that are 2 meters high with some specific colors. That's the camel can see. So of course it's a bit it's complicated. We cannot educate camels, but it has been taken into account. Now, if we take the example, what we were thinking also is the example of forest, especially rainforest or dense vegetation. This is why, for example, in the new standards, we don't necessarily say that from a sign to another sign, it shall be 20 meters or 10 meters. In some environments, it doesn't make sense. But for sure, from one side, if you are approaching the area, from one side, you should be capable to see the next sign. This is how you can adjust the marking to your own environment.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Next question that's come up is, how do you take into account the differences in different languages, especially because different terms mean different things? How is that taken into consideration when you're developing the standards?
This is an excellent question. I would say that when I'm working on the standards, I have an advantage. I am not a native English speaker, and I'm not. I mean, I speak English well enough, but it always requires me some effort. So I have that opportunity personally to quickly check if what we are writing in English would make sense, would easily be translatable in my own native language. That's one thing. However, technically, there are also other rules we must pay attention to. For example, the length of sentences is one thing. So for example, when you write standards, and that's also true for national standards, a sentence that is more than 25 words, you should start questioning the sentence. It's also using appropriate grammatical rules in the language you use to try to ease the translation in another language as much as possible. It is also about questioning some jargon. For example, in the Mine Action Center, some jargon has been developed mostly in English, and sometimes the terms that have been developed are not easy to translate into other languages. For example, the term fade out in English is not easy to translate it to my own native language. So these are also things to pay attention to, and there are other tips. But I would say that above all, the rule is that a standard, international standard or national standard, should not be developed to be read, but should be developed to be used.
I think that's a very good point to end on. And I think your earlier point as well, that this particular IMAS does not deal with demining work site setups, is also an important one to keep in mind for our audience. And that's another standard that that obviously is an essential one for those involved in demining. But these are two separate issues, which I think you highlighted very well at the beginning when you looked at the objective. And I think more and more these standards are evolving in terms of being highlighting, as you said very well, the outcome. What kind of an outcome are we looking at, and not just what are the various elements that one might consider in procedures, which is a level down really from the standard. Lionel, this has been a very interesting presentation. I'm wondering if you could just share with us your final thoughts on this theme, or others about standards that that might be interesting for our audience today.
Before launching the work of the technical working group, we had the opportunity to launch a short survey with a couple of countries to get their issues, challenges with marking, and we did that before reviewing that international action standard, and it was very useful. So whenever, if ever we are not coming to you to get your feedback, it's really important that you feel free to provide feedback on the application of international action standards to your specific context. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lionel. And I think that's a very important point. And of course, Sasha Logi mentioned the IMAS website. And this website has many, many interesting things on it, including the possibility to provide feedback and new ideas. And so I think it's important for everyone who's interested in this topic to be interacting with that website. It's really an essential element of communication between the standards mechanisms and the audience. They're your standards, and so everyone should feel invited to participate. I think that's an excellent message that you end on. So thank you very much, Lionel. Merci
Thank you very much.
That was a very interesting presentation, and thank you for all your hard work in developing standards, because Lionel is involved in almost every working group on standards that has happened in the last little while. So he's been essential in this process. So thank you very much, Lionel.
Thank you, Tammy.
Bueno, ahora vamos a cambiar de tema. Soy yo que va a presentar el próximo tema. Y vamos a cambiar un poco de los temas muy técnicas en un tema un poco más de conceptual para pensar un poco en la esquema general en donde nos encontramos en acción contra las minas y la posibilidad de ver por el trabajo de realmente pensar en la calidad de lo que estamos haciendo, para qué estamos haciéndolo y qué recursos estamos aplicando a ese trabajo. Veo que la presentación, hay algún problema, disculpe con la primera diapositiva, pero estamos hablando ahora de una nota técnica, la nota técnica 711.3, eh, que está ligado con la norma de liberación de tierras. Es una nota que ha sido pedido por la comunidad en general, en particular las autoridades nacionales que lucharon con el concepto de cuál es su esfuerzo, cuál esfuerzo tienen que exigir bajo en particular la Convención de Ottawa, que es la prohibición de minas antipersonal, para cumplir con sus obligaciones. En ese sentido, hablamos mucho en la comunidad desarrollando esta nota técnica, teniendo en cuenta que una nota técnica realmente es una descripción, es descriptiva e informativa, no es normativa como los estándares, las normas en sí, pero el objetivo realmente es de tener mayor conocimiento del tema y los conceptos que están jugando adentro del termo. La terminología, obviamente, de acción contra las minas las definiciones existen adentro de la norma en 410, pero obviamente eso es muy corto. Una definición no tiene la posibilidad de describir todos los elementos, sobre todo relacionado a un concepto sumamente complejo como todo esfuerzo razonable. Entonces pensamos que esa nota podría ayudar. Y bueno, voy a explicar algunos aspectos de esa nota y podemos, espero, tener algunas preguntas de los participantes. Estoy teniendo un poco de dificultad a cambiar mi diapositiva, pero... aquí estamos. Gracias. Entonces, las dos preguntas que vamos a ver durante esa presentación son los siguientes. ¿Realmente el significado de este concepto? Y adentro del marco de acción contra las minas. Y también cuando consideramos que todo esfuerzo razonable ha sido aplicado para liberar tierra, ¿cuándo es el momento que podemos decir que realmente tenemos confianza que todo ese esfuerzo que está razonable, llegamos a ese punto? Al nivel de los técnicos, pero también a nivel político de las autoridades nacionales. Entonces, empezando con el objetivo de ese IMAS, realmente es, como yo he hablado antes, es realmente de lograr de tener una orientación adicional, cómo lograr todo esfuerzo razonable. Y tener una gestión sólida de los programas de acción contra minas. La definición es sencillo. realmente describo un nivel mínimo aceptable de esfuerzo para identificar y documentar áreas contaminadas. Se puede pensar que ha aplicado todo el esfuerzo razonable cuando se considera que el compromiso de recursos adicionales no es razonable. Y vamos a entrar un poco en cómo se haga esa reflexión. Pero tenemos que realizar que este concepto va a tener que ser contextualizados. Lo que va a ser razonable en un contexto no va a ser razonable en otro contexto. Los varios elementos que se está jugando en ese sentido son elementos como el presupuesto que tiene el país en cuestión para realizar los esfuerzos. También el contexto del país, qué tamaño es, si las áreas contaminadas son tienen mapas y pueden isolarse rápidamente, o si no hay mucha información para poder decidir cuáles áreas pueden ser peligrosas. Entonces, tenemos que contextualizar mucho ese concepto adentro del contexto de un país. Por eso es un concepto político en mismo tiempo de ser un concepto técnico. Entonces, el marco normativo de este concepto de todo esfuerzo razonable es realmente la norma de liberación de tierras. Ese concepto de liberación de tierras que tenemos que asegurar que todas las áreas del país están consideradas, que un análisis ha sido hecho que puede considerar cómo abordar el tema, que hemos hecho un procedimiento que empieza con el estudio no técnico, que pasa a estudio técnico si necesario, y también al despeje de áreas contaminadas. Pero no es solamente la norma de liberación de tierras que nos da el marco normativo. También hay varios otros estándares que están considerados, y por eso nos da mucha complicación en llegar a un concepto de todo esfuerzo razonable, porque realmente el concepto de todo esfuerzo razonable nos indica que estamos haciendo el buen trabajo y siguiendo todos los elementos de buena práctica que están relacionados a liberación de tierras. Tenemos que considerar todos esos aspectos en nuestro concepto. Entonces, no hay una respuesta sencilla en este concepto, y por esta razón el diálogo con el sector y adentro del sector es muy importante, con todos los socios que que participan en el sector, incluyendo donantes que en muchos contextos están dando los recursos para que realicen las operaciones de liberación de tierras. Entonces, ¿hasta qué punto podemos gastar recursos? Obviamente es muy importante primeramente que el gobierno del país que está contaminado tiene la potencial de dirigir esa cuestión, pero otra vez los donantes tienen algo que decir también. Primero, hay dos cuestiones que están íntimamente relacionados con lo que es el concepto de todo esfuerzo razonable. Uno es la responsabilidad. Y aquí tenemos un concepto de responsabilidad legal Entonces, que se refiere a cualquier responsabilidad, deber o obligación legal, pero puede ser también que haya un concepto de responsabilidad político también en el contexto de un gobierno que tiene la responsabilidad político de dar recursos y de responder a las necesidades de su población. En ese sentido, la responsabilidad puede ligar con un accidente, puede ser la responsabilidad de protección de la población que tiene un país o un operador, una organización que está haciendo el trabajo de despeje y de liberación de tierras para asegurar que su trabajo está bien hecho. Tiene que ser vinculado al incumplimiento de una política o procedimiento acordado. Cuando estamos hablando del incumplimiento de todo esfuerzo razonable, puede ser negligencia de una organización también. Entonces, no llegamos hasta el todo esfuerzo razonable si estamos tratando con técnicos o organizaciones que no están aplicando las reglas. Y ellos tienen que tomar la responsabilidad para su calidad técnica a todos los niveles. Obviamente, en el sentido general del país, la última autoridad es la autoridad nacional, que tiene responsabilidad para meter en marcha una política adecuada y hacer la gestión de calidad de sus operadores. El otro concepto que es íntimamente relacionado con el concepto de todo esfuerzo razonable es la gestión de riesgos y contaminación residual. Ese concepto también es una cosa, podríamos hablar todo el día sobre ese concepto de contaminación residual y gestión de riesgos, pero es importante considerar eso adentro de todo esfuerzo razonable. Es decir, que la gestión de riesgos tiene que ser un primer elemento en cualquier sistema de gestión donde considera el contexto y que podríamos asegurar que consideramos los riesgos en todas las áreas operativas. Entonces, en cualquier situación de desminado, sabemos que tenemos la posibilidad de despejar un área y que hay algo que se queda ahí. Siempre hay ese riesgo. Mismo si seguimos todos los procedimientos operativos, siempre hay un riesgo. ¿Por qué hay ese riesgo? Bueno, puede ser que nuestro equipamiento no es adecuado. Puede ser que la contaminación está más profundo que las normas, por ejemplo, que tenemos en el país. Puede ser que no tenemos el conocimiento adecuado del artefacto, porque puede ser un artefacto que no tiene metal, que está desconocido y las normas no consideran esa situación. Entonces, hay un riesgo en todas las operaciones que vamos a dejar algo, una contaminación residual atrás de nuestros esfuerzos. Entonces, ¿hasta qué punto estamos dispuestos a aceptar riesgo? ¿Hasta qué punto es posible que la autoridad nacional dice, sabemos que hay un riesgo, pero nuestra política y nuestras normas nacionales van a aceptar ese riesgo? En esta consideración tenemos siempre dos elementos. Tenemos de un lado asegurar que todos los artefactos explosivos se encontraron en nuestras operaciones. Entonces, asegurar que 100% de los artefactos explosivos están encontrados. Del otro lado, tenemos el aspecto que tenemos que gastar bien nuestros recursos. No se puede gastar recursos inútilmente. Y sabemos que el desminado, la liberación de tierras, no es la única cosa que el gobierno tiene que asegurar. Obviamente hay consideraciones de salud, hay consideraciones de educación, hay consideraciones de infraestructura y todos esos elementos pueden también llegar a asegurar vidas o meter en peligro vidas si no están como dado a la población. Entonces, esta decisión no es fácil y no se puede decir que hay una respuesta sencilla. La política en medio nacional de todo esfuerzo razonable necesita considerar los dos lados de este continuo. De un lado, asegurar que todos los artefactos están encontrados. De otro lado, no gastar recursos inútilmente. Un ejemplo, un país que hemos visto, donde yo he trabajado en el pasado, tenían una política que su desminado iba a tardar 200 años, que los desminadores, que los zapadores iban a unirse uno al lado de otro en unos equipos que van frente para detectar cada metro cuadrado de todo el país. Bueno, eso es un esfuerzo grande, pero es un esfuerzo razonable. No es la aplicación del IMA 711 porque no tenemos un procedimiento que respecta, una norma que respecta que vamos a iniciar con un análisis, que sería el estudio no técnico, que después vamos a hacer investigaciones intrusivas que van a llevarnos a un estudio técnico y que luego solo vamos a despejar las áreas que resultan en eso. Estamos despejando todo el país. Eso no es solo un compromiso de recursos, pero es un compromiso de tiempo. Mientras que estamos despejando un lado del país que no está contaminado y quizás hubiéramos podido saber eso con un simple análisis, en otro lado tenemos un accidente que está pasando. Entonces, esta decisión por parte del gobierno de dónde está la política nacional, en qué se va a significar la política nacional de todo esfuerzo razonable, es algo sumamente importante. Es el inicio del sistema de gestión de calidad y también de las normas nacionales técnicas. Y después de esta decisión política es donde los operadores y las diferentes organizaciones que están aplicando las normas y haciendo las operaciones de liberación de tierras es el marco donde ellos pueden trabajar. Entonces todo empieza con el lado político. Perdón, tengo unos desafíos con mi aparato aquí. Ok. La consideración de todo esfuerzo razonable va a cambiar con el tiempo. Sabemos generalmente eso es un esquema que viene de IMAS, que está también en la norma sobre gestión de riesgos. Pero nos da un esquema que creo que es como muy útil en el sentido de que sabemos que va a haber una fase proactiva. Esa fase, lo más activo de un país de las operaciones de liberación de tierra va a ser después del conflicto o durante un conflicto, donde la contaminación se está instalando y donde es lo más peligroso para la población. ¿Por qué más peligroso? Bueno, en los días y meses y años después de que una mina se está instalado, obviamente hay menos información sobre dónde están esos artefactos explosivos. Poco a poco, durante el tiempo, vamos acumulando más conocimiento y estamos trabajando para metiendo lo más alto número de recursos posible en quitar esa contaminación antes de que tengamos accidentes. También los objetivos de asegurar una situación de paz, donde la gente se puede vivir plenamente y libremente en una situación de seguridad y desarrollar sus entornos utilizando la tierra que está libre de sospecha. Entonces, todos estos objetivos están como más importantes, más cerca del conflicto y más cerca de la contaminación que fue puesto. Una vez que llegamos al punto importante de haber despejado todas las áreas y quitado todos los artefactos explosivos que son conocidos, entramos en una fase reactiva. Entonces, todo esfuerzo razonable va a ser más alto en la fase proactiva. Porque sabemos que hay siempre un riesgo residual que no íbamos a poder encontrar todos los artefactos, que también va a haber un fase reactivo. ¿Qué es la fase reactivo? Terminamos todas las operaciones de despeje que están enfocadas en despejar áreas conocidas porque están todos terminados. Y entramos en una fase donde si alguien encuentre un artefacto explosivo, puede llamar a un número, contactar a las autoridades que se quede en una capacidad estatal normalmente, que se puede responder a cualquier información adicional nueva. Hemos terminado todo lo que conocimos en la fase reactivo, estamos solo respondiendo a lo que viene. Entonces, nuestro esfuerzo razonable normalmente en la fase reactiva va a haber una capacidad mínima para responder. Va a depender, por ejemplo, de que si había contaminación en todo el país, quizás tendríamos que tener una capacidad en todo el país para responder. Si la contaminación ha sido muy localizado en una provincia, un departamento, quizás la capacidad reactiva va a estar en ese departamento o provincia. Es razonable que enfocamos la respuesta para responder al riesgo que conocemos. Entonces, nuestra estimación del esfuerzo razonable va a variar obviamente mucho según la fase en donde encontramos en el programa. Es posible, y este diagrama no nos da esa visión, pero obviamente es siempre posible que tenemos un nuevo conflicto o que tenemos fases de conflicto en varias partes del país. En ese sentido, podríamos tener una fase proactiva en una provincia, pero en el resto del país tenemos una fase reactiva. Es un concepto que puede tener su complejidad, sobre todo hoy en día cuando sabemos que hay conflictos que están adentro de países con a veces muchos actores no estatales que son armados y que siguen colocar artefactos explosivos. Pero bueno, para entender bien el concepto lo metimos en una fase lineal y tenemos que tener en cuenta que se puede ser más complicado que eso. Pero este diagrama nos puede ilustrar muy bien que la mayor inversión de una manera para aplicar nuestro esfuerzo razonable va a ser inmediatamente después del conflicto y con tiempo vamos bajando con nuestra actualización y progreso de llegar a despejar todo el país. Hay varios factores que también van a influir. Obviamente los recursos a veces no son disponibles inmediatamente después del conflicto. Puede ser que hay un tiempo que pasa antes de que podamos entrar en nuestro trabajo, que podemos iniciar. En ese sentido, quizás el gráfico va a ser un poco distinto. Quizás va a haber un tiempo antes de que haya apoyo de los donantes exteriores. Entonces va a haber un momento en que vamos a ver un incremento de recursos que va a corresponder a tener más recursos disponibles. Entonces, no es un concepto muy fácil y nota técnica quiere hablar en detalles o habla en detalles de todas las consideraciones que son numerosos que una autoridad nacional tiene que tener. Yo creo que es importante que todas las autoridades nacionales consideran ese concepto y si posible que tienen una política, un documento que puede elaborar su concepto de todo esfuerzo razonable. Puede ser que eso ayuda mucho en realizar y respetar las normas alrededor de liberación de tierras. Y también puede dar un apoyo a todos los operadores que están interpretando esos conceptos. Voy a terminar allí y vamos a ver si hay algunas preguntas. Tal vez tenemos tiempo para uno o dos. Entonces, yo creo que tenemos una pregunta en cuanto a los esfuerzos razonables. ¿Qué mecanismos se han utilizado aparte de los actuales para la lucha contra las minas a nivel mundial? Bueno, yo creo que un mecanismo ha sido realmente las normas internacionales y más. Ese mecanismo ha dado la esquema de calidad internacional para el sector y eso nos ha guiado realmente en cómo implementar los compromisos políticos se encuentran adentro de por ejemplo, la Convención de Ottawa, la prohibición de minas antipersonal, también en la Convención CCM, la prohibición de submuniciones, racimos, y también el CCW, de la Convención sobre Armas Convencionales. La esquema de IMAS nos da un mapeo técnico de cómo tendríamos que realizar ese trabajo. Y yo creo que es un esfuerzo enorme político y también para cada técnico que está involucrado en acción contra las minas, de tomar las decisiones básicas de cuál es el esfuerzo razonable en su situación particular. Tenemos decisiones que son políticos, generales, adentro de las normas nacionales, pero también tenemos decisiones al nivel del campo minado, cada técnico para decidir cuándo paro, cuál es razonable en ese contexto. Y yo creo que tenemos una guía dentro de los IMAS y también, obviamente, en las normas nacionales y los procedimientos para guiarnos. Yo creo que ahora llegamos al final de nuestra sección sobre todos esfuerzos razonables, pero yo creo que es un tema que podríamos como ver en otra situación, en otro webinar quizás, en detalles. Solo decir que la norma tiene también algunos casos adentro para ilustrar cómo aplicar ese todo esfuerzo razonable en diferentes contextos. Son ejemplos que pueden como aclarar un poco la complejidad del concepto. Pero obviamente, otra vez más, ese concepto tiene que ser discutido al nivel nacional y a veces subnacional para poder realmente descubrir para considerar todos los aspectos complejos del tema. No quiero tomar demasiado tiempo de nuestro próximo tema, entonces yo creo que vamos a continuar. Muchas gracias por la atención. Y yo creo que ese tema es sumamente interesante y yo espero que podríamos también responder a algunas preguntas que no pudimos alcanzar por escrito de nuestros participantes. Entonces, no hay problema, van a recibir una respuesta de todas formas a sus preguntas. Ahora quiero tomar el paso siguiente de poder ver un tema para mí que es al inicio y al raíz de nuestro trabajo en acción contra las minas. Es realmente el tema de asistencia a víctimas. Las víctimas están pues al inicio de todo nuestro esfuerzo en ese sector. La consideración de poder proteger vidas es al raíz de todo lo que estamos haciendo. Es mi placer realmente de presentar nuestro siguiente presentadora. Ella también ha trabajado por el Centro Internacional de Desminado Humanitario en Ginebra. Ha trabajado en temas como género y diversidad en el pasado, pero hoy en día está trabajando con la ONG Humanity and Inclusion, que ha estado realmente fundamental en el desarrollo de esa norma, el IMAS sobre la asistencia a víctimas. Ahora voy a dar la palabra a Caitlin Hodge para presentar esa norma esencial. Y yo creo para todos los países que han tenido una afectación de minas, aunque han completado todo su despeje, puede ser que tienen todavía víctimas y sobrevivientes que sufren todavía. Entonces, esa norma es esencial para todos los países que han sido afectados en algún momento. Caitlin, te doy la palabra.
Thank you very much, Tammy, for that introduction. And thank you to the Organization of American States for the invitation to speak today about this new standard. I just want to check, I have some slides, if I should share them or if they will be shared. I can.
You can share them, Caitlin.
All right. Let me just see. All right. Do you see this all right?
Not yet. I don't see it quite on my screen yet. Oh, it's coming up. There we go. We're not in presentation. Oh, there we go. Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Good morning, everyone. So as Tammy has mentioned, I am Caitlin Hodge. I'm a specialist on armed violence reduction with humanity and inclusion. And today I'll be speaking about one of the newer mine action standards, victim assistance. And this is IMAS 1310. I do apologize that my slides are in English, but I will try to explain as much as I can, so hopefully everything will be clear. Victim assistance is quite a complex ecosystem. It involves the services that are provided to victims, referral systems to ensure that they are linked to those services, laws and policies to support the rights of victims, and data collection to understand the needs and gaps. As such, many different stakeholders need to be involved in victim assistance that go beyond traditional mine action actors. And this has resulted in the past in, admittedly, a lot of confusion over what are the roles and responsibilities, particularly in mine action related to this important topic. So this is a little bit about the evolution of victim assistance. So for the first 20 years or so of humanitarian mine action, we were looking at a pretty fuzzy, unclear situation that started to change in 2016 in the framework of the Convention on Cluster Munitions, where the idea of an integrated approach to victim assistance started to be elaborated. The landmark was in 2021 when International Mine Action Standard 1310 on victim assistance was adopted. And in 2023, it was amended slightly. So the initial version from 2021 is available in Spanish. Unfortunately, the translation is not yet in, the amendment is not yet in Spanish. And so there it's mostly about definitions that have shifted, but a lot of the content that I'm going to discuss in my presentation, that is available in the 2021 Spanish version. So one of the first things that this standard has done is to establish some key definitions and principles for victim assistance going forward. The first thing is a definition of what a victim is. So in the context of mine action, a victim is someone who has experienced one of the following consequences due to an accident involving explosive ordnance. Physical, emotional, and/or psychological injury, economic loss, someone whose recognition, enjoyment, or exercise of their human rights on an equal basis with others has been hindered, and whose full and effective participation in society has been restricted. So it can be any of these that qualifies someone as a victim. There are also several sub-definitions, including what makes a direct versus an indirect victim, and what is a survivor. So I won't go into all of that. We couldn't cover it all in the short time frame, but the definitions are set out in the standard. In terms of victim assistance, this is defined as including both broad and specific efforts to address the needs and rights of victims. So I'll look at both of those individually, starting with broader efforts. What is really important is that victim assistance broader efforts are undertaken by sectors other than the mine action sector. They include the delivery of VA services, data collection, coordination, laws, and policies. So I've put some of the common examples of victim assistance services here on this slide. They include emergency and continuing medical care, rehabilitation, so that can include the provision of prosthetics and orthotics, mental health and psychosocial support, and socioeconomic inclusion. For example, the provision of livelihood support, cash assistance, inclusive education, or even inclusive sports and cultural activities. So as you can see from this, the types of actors, ministries, sectors that are involved in victim assistance broader efforts is extremely immense, and this makes it a true cross-sectoral effort. Victim assistance specific efforts, on the other hand, are those that are undertaken by mine action actors themselves. These are typically part of land release or risk education activities. They allow the mine action sector contribute to facilitating access to those services that I just mentioned. And what is really important is that it is done in a non-discriminatory manner. So I'll expand a little bit about this one because it's a frequent source of misconceptions, but it's actually not only is this in the standard, it is a concept that is even present in the Mine Ban Convention and the Convention on Cluster Munition. So non-discrimination, it states that like all mine action activities, victim assistance should not discriminate on the basis of age, gender, disability, ethnicity, religion, language, any of these types of factors. But, and this is the important part as well, victim assistance should not discriminate against or among victims or between victims and those who have been injured from other causes. So this means that when we implement victim assistance, we do not exclude people who have been injured by other means. For instance, a car accident, could be a history of illness. So all individuals, regardless of the cause, should be given equal access to services. What makes it victim assistance is that among those receiving it and benefiting from it are victims of explosive ordnance. In the standard, you'll find several other principles that are important to victim assistance, but I wanted to highlight this one in particular. The second part of the standard, and this is really getting into the meat of it, is it defines roles and responsibilities of mine action actors. And it's one of the first time that we have down on a page exactly who should be doing what and when. It includes several different actors that have roles to play in the victim assistance process. These include recommendations for affected states, particularly national mine action authorities and national mine action centers. There are requirements for mine action operators. So these are actually shall statements that any organization that is providing risk education or land release must comply with. And there are also recommendations for survivor organizations and their representative entities to ensure that they also contribute to the process of developing and implementing victim assistance. If you are here representing one of these actors, I would encourage you to seek out the standard. The Spanish version includes all of these actions for a detailed list of the shall, shoulds, and mays for your respective type of entity. In terms of the types of actions, there are too many specific commitments to list here, but we can extract some general areas where there is recommended involvement of mine action actors. This starts with the establishment of laws, policies, strategies, and national standards to frame victim assistance and to ensure that victims' rights are upheld. There's the data collection and analysis component that supports victim assistance. So this would include having data on victims, on the services that are provided, and on the activities that make up victim assistance. Very important to be able to ensure that people access the services is to have service directories and referral mechanisms. So for example, in IMAS 1310, it states that affected states should provide the enabling framework. So establish a service directory that is available to all who need it. Whereas operators conducting mine action activities have a responsibility to make use of that service directory and provide referrals to those victims that they encounter during their activities. Medical assessment and emergency transport is another area that is covered. This is particularly for land release activities. And finally, crucially, the involvement and engaging of survivors and persons with disabilities. This goes all the way from making sure that services, information that is shared is accessible to all of these groups, to ensuring consultation and meaningful participation of survivors and persons with disabilities through the entire process of developing victim assistance programs, activities, and frameworks. So this has been a brief overview of IMAS 1310. I'm happy to answer any questions and encourage you also to check out the standard because, as I said, there's way more than I could cover here, and it is very to the point and clear on the different roles. Happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you so much, Caitlin, for that really thoughtful presentation. We have time now for some questions. So the first question I have for you is, are there courses and institutions of excellence in terms of the victim assistance area of work? And how would you recommend that people interested in it would get training in this area?
So I would say victim assistance is right now at its infancy stage. We've seen with explosive ordnance risk education, for example, in the last 5 years, there's been a real boom in resources that are available. And I think with victim assistance, that boom is still about to come. So unfortunately, there is not a dedicated training course at global level or resource on victim assistance. And I think one of the reasons for that is the many different areas that are covered as part of it. But I think among mine action operators, we have many organizations that do have technical expertise in victim assistance, and they can provide support and technical assistance to, for instance, affected states to be able to ensure that they are operationalizing IMAS 1310. I can, on a HI humanity and inclusion note, say that we do provide this technical assistance in countries where we are operational. So you are welcome to reach out to me. I shared my contact details on the slide, but I think many different mine action operators would also be in a position to provide dedicated support if contacted.
Okay, thank you for that. We heard earlier about some competencies being discussed. I'm wondering if there's a kind of a route mapping to basically have different competencies laid out in terms of victim assistance. Is that anything that humanity and inclusion would be supporting, for example?
I think we would very much support it should it be taken on. We as HI are currently working on developing our competency framework on victim assistance. And it is an interesting exercise because we have to think of both competencies in terms of mine action and an understanding of the disarmament sector and the conventional frameworks, but also there's a lot of different elements related to human rights, understanding of international humanitarian law, support to persons with disabilities, and engaging those networks. So it is something that we are thinking about, and we would be quite excited should there be an effort to develop this more globally.
Yeah, I personally think it would be an excellent idea. Maybe something, I'm not sure if Sasha is still listening, but maybe something that the IMS Review Board can take up. There was another question related to that about if there's any website or database or any online information, perhaps on your website, I don't know, but if is there any materials you would recommend?
So I think these are often very region specific. So at global level, it is mostly the standard. I know for Southeast Asia, for example, they have developed several different resources through their regional coordination mechanisms. In terms of Latin America, we have some resources that we have developed in Spanish at Humanity and Inclusion, as we are active in Colombia and Venezuela. And so we would be happy to share those, but we don't have them on a website. So I think you're really seeing from my responses what I mean by we are at its infancy. I think many actors are still trying to figure out how to operationalize this new standard. And so there is a huge need for more tools and resources, and they're being developed on an ad hoc basis now, but I hope in a couple years that we will have something more global.
Okay, thanks for that. I know that one of the big challenges was in the past, in the early days of Mine Action, to not confuse the medical side of the response with the work that the Mine Action sector does, so that disability was mainstreamed and not just for mine, the services were not just for mine survivors, but for any person within the community, disability community. What would you say the biggest challenge is now where we are today in terms of providing services to survivors and victims?
I think, I mean, if we're talking at a broad level of victim assistance, exactly what you're saying, we're still facing a lot of misunderstandings and misconceptions about what victim assistance can mean. So in many contexts, victim assistance is assumed to be simply support to victims in the form of cash transfers, which do play a very important role, but they are only one piece of a massive ecosystem. So what we are trying to work on as HI is to broaden that understanding, to understand what is victim assistance and how can it be supported through strategies and standards. What we see as crucial to this is that it be an interministerial, intersectoral effort. And that is something that can bring challenges because it requires often reaching outside of our comfort zones. It requires being able to build diverse platforms at national level of different types of stakeholders and ministries. And so I think the first step is fostering an understanding of what are our different roles, all of us in this victim assistance process. And it doesn't have, it sounds complicated, but it doesn't have to be if we break it down into steps. I mean, for most Mine Action actors, we're talking about being able to know what services are available and provide referrals to victims or other persons in need. For national actors, we're talking about being able to coordinate with other ministries to set up the relevant strategies. And so with proper guidance, this is actually a very feasible process, but it requires having all of the right people around the table, and that's key.
Certainly, and I mean, we were talking about all reasonable effort a few minutes ago, and of course, one of the main things is to have the dialogue in the sector. How do you see the inclusion of survivors, speaking about gender and diversity, which was your one area of work of yours? How do you see that evolving in terms of the sector generally?
So I think there's still a lot to be seen in terms of being able to achieve meaningful participation of survivors and persons with disabilities. I can give an example from Ukraine. So I was in Ukraine for the last year, working including on victim assistance, and we organized several coordination roundtables together with Danish Refugee Council. And one of the things that was done at an earlier one was to organize a sign language interpreter to enable participation of people with hearing impairment to the coordination meetings. And the first one, no one with hearing impairment attended. So you could easily see that and say, okay, there's no need. But it took word getting out. And by the second and third ones, having that accessibility measure place, that we started having representatives of persons with disabilities, organizations of persons with disabilities coming and using those sign language interpreters. So I think the first thing is that we need to make sure that we are not making assumptions, that we are looking at data, that we are trying to understand, that we are engaging persons with disabilities to understand what they need to make it possible for them to participate meaningfully, and then to make sure that we are budgeting for that and making time to do that. And then I think there is a lot of potential, but that first step has to be done.
Well, that's a very important point. And I think many of us think about survivors, and we view someone who may have a prosthetic limb, but of course there are many types of injuries, including hearing and vision, that may result from a mine accident. Caitlin, I'll ask you maybe just to give us some final thoughts, and we'll wrap up the topic for the moment. But as I was saying, I think this is the fundamental topic for the sector, because this is where we all began, with people being injured by these terrible devices. So any final thoughts from your side?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you said in opening this about how long after states have achieved completion, long after the last mine is gone, victims remain. And so this is something that, you know, we cannot forget about. And what is good is that this victim assistance that we have known since the beginning stages of the conventions is a top priority, is a top commitment. Now we have a roadmap to actually being able to make sure that it's done in a quality way, in a way that is impactful and meaningful, and can make a difference in the lives of victims, to be able to ensure that they're able to live fully and their rights are exercised. So I think we just need to make sure that we're consulting that roadmap. And I have also made note on the recommendations for more global resources. I am no longer with Geneva International Center for Humanitarian Demining, but this is something that I hope that we can push forward as a sector soon in the years to come.
Thank you for that. Yes, and I know there's long been calls for more resources, so hopefully that will reach the appropriate ears. So thank you so much for that. Thank you to Humanity and Inclusion in general for all the work that was done on developing this standard and for advocating for it in the first place, for a new version of it, which was absent for a very long time due to, you know, worries about overlapping into other sectors that that weren't our main focus. But I think that this standard really provides a guidance to the sector in terms of where we do belong, in terms of assisting victims at large. So thank you so much for that presentation.
Thank you.
Okay. Entonces, estamos llegando al final de nuestra sección, de nuestro componente de presentaciones técnicas hoy. Quiero agradecer a todos los presentadores de mi parte para sus presentaciones muy interesantes. Quiero agregar también que en términos de las traducciones de los IMAs, que la OEA y el programa ICMA va a continuar su trabajo de traducción, sobre todo para asegurar que todos los documentos que vimos hoy, algunos son nuevos, entonces no hemos tenido el tiempo todavía para traducirles, y hay otros que están saliendo todos los meses, entonces vamos a enfocar un trabajo concentrado en asegurar que pues toda la gente que habla español pueden encontrar este contenido en su idioma natal. Yo creo que el sujeto o el objetivo de poder divulgar las normas internacionales es un asunto muy importante y tenemos que agradecer gobierno de Estados Unidos por su apoyo en esa labor de traducción. Fue nuestro donante y ellos son responsables realmente para esta traducción, para que nosotros tengamos los recursos necesarios para hacer esas traducciones. Entonces, muchas gracias al Departamento de Estado de Estados Unidos. En este momento vamos a pasar a nuestro cierre final. Entonces, quiero dar la palabra al general Flavio Luis de Oliveira Pinto, secretario general de la Junta Interamericana de Defensa, para las palabras finales de cierre. Por favor, Excelencia.
Graças, Tami. Senhoras e senhores, bom dia. Gostaria de iniciar essas palavras expressando meus mais sinceros agradecimentos aos participantes e ao público presente neste seminário de Desminagem Humanitária. Em primeiro lugar, a presença de cada um de vocês foi essencial para o sucesso deste evento. Fomos aproximadamente 2.000 pessoas inscritas de mais de 25 países, que representaram a motivação e o empenho necessários para avançarmos na nossa missão de reduzir riscos e salvar vidas humanas. A participação ativa e o interesse demonstrado por todos vocês refletem o compromisso com um mundo mais seguro e livre de minas antipessoais. Sem a presença e o apoio do público, esse seminário não teria, com certeza, o mesmo impacto ou alcance. Além disso, aos nossos estimados palestrantes, agradeço profundamente. Muito obrigado por compartilharem seu conhecimento e experiência. As suas apresentações foram, com certeza, enriquecedoras e fundamentais para o entendimento dos desafios e avanços na desminagem humanitária. Vocês, nossos palestrantes, dedicaram tempo e esforço para preparar conteúdos relevantes e inspiradores, contribuindo significativamente para o sucesso deste evento. O empenho de cada um dos senhores em contribuir com este seminário foi, sem dúvida, inestimável e altamente apreciado. A diversidade de perspectivas e a profundidade de conhecimento que vocês trouxeram ajudaram a iluminar muitos aspectos complexos da desminagem humanitária. Ademais, gostaria também de prestar homenagem àqueles que nos precederam na atividade de desminagem humanitária. Seu trabalho árduo, dedicação, estabeleceram as bases técnicas e operacionais que seguimos hoje. O legado de conhecimentos técnicos que vocês deixaram continua a ser uma fonte de inspiração e orientação para todos nós. É graças ao esforço incansável dessas pessoas pioneiras que conseguimos alcançar tantos progressos. Seu legado vive nas práticas e nos procedimentos que ainda utilizamos e nos ensina a importância da perseverança e da inovação contínua. Também, aos atuais envolvidos na atividade de desminagem humanitária, nosso mais profundo reconhecimento, pois seu trabalho diário, muitas vezes em condições difíceis e perigosas, é fundamental para a segurança e o bem-estar de inúmeras comunidades ao redor do mundo. A dedicação de vocês é um exemplo de coragem e compromisso com a humanidade. Cada operação de desminagem realizada, cada área limpa de explosivos, representa vidas salvas e comunidades inteiras que podem viver em segurança e paz. Vocês são os heróis silenciosos cuja bravura e determinação fazem uma diferença palpável todos os dias. Ainda gostaria de agradecer, claro, aos organizadores deste evento. A sinergia e o trabalho contínuo entre a Junta Interamericana de Defesa, JID, a Organização dos Estados Americanos, OEA, e as organizações parceiras de desminagem humanitária foram evidentes em cada detalhe deste seminário. A coordenação e o esforço de todos vocês
foram essenciais para a realização deste encontro tão bem-sucedido. A colaboração eficiente e harmoniosa entre todas estas entidades demonstrou o poder do trabalho em equipe e o impacto positivo que pode ser alcançado quando se trabalha em conjunto por um objetivo comum. Sem o esforço incansável dos organizadores, esse seminário não teria sido possível. Por fim, é fundamental ressaltar o trabalho de uma pessoa que se dedicou de corpo e alma à atividade de desminagem humanitária, a senhora Tammy Hall. Não só participou deste seminário como moderadora e palestrante, mas também ajudou na organização e nos esforços para tornar este evento possível. Ela, após vários anos de dedicação à desminagem humanitária e ao programa ICMA-OEA, na Colômbia, agora busca novos desafios. Creio que, nesse momento, não teríamos condições de expressar sozinhos nosso agradecimento, Tammy. Então, senhora Tammy Hall, reunimos algumas pessoas que conviveram com você para fazer, então, esse agradecimento. Por favor.
Hola Tami, en nombre de nosotros del Grupo de Monitores Interamericanos de la Junta Interamericana de Defensa, quisiera agradecerte por todo el apoyo que diste en estos 2 años a nuestras actividades. Hemos aprendido mucho con toda tu capacidad profesional y tu conocimiento. Y también hemos disfrutado de tu amistad. Espero que seas muy feliz en su nuevo desafío junto a su familia en Canadá. Un gran abrazo y saludos.
Hola Tami. Quiero agradecerte estos 2 años que compartimos juntas en ICMACO. Me enseñaste muchos temas relacionados con la acción integral contra las minas a nivel técnico. Quiero agradecerte por todos esos aprendizajes que tuvimos juntas. Espero tengas un buen retorno a casa. Te deseo muchos éxitos en tus nuevas actividades y cuentas conmigo aquí en Colombia para lo que necesites. Muchas gracias. Buen viento y buena mar.
Hola Tami, este no es un mensaje de despedida, este es un mensaje para expresarte mi infinita gratitud por tu pasión, tu exposición, tu compromiso y entrega a toda la acción contra minas. Fue un verdadero placer poder trabajar contigo estos años y poder compartir todas esas experiencias técnicas y profesionales que seguro hicieron de este equipo un equipo mejor. Sé lo mucho que anhelas estar en casa con tu familia y conmigo, así que pues eso también me hace muy feliz. Deseo por supuesto que la acción contra minas nos vuelva a juntar en algún momento, así que feliz regreso a casa y aquí en Colombia eres bienvenida cuando quieras.
Tami, este es un momento de emociones encontradas. Nos embarga la tristeza de que nos dejes, pues porque tus capacidades humanas, técnicas y profesionales no tienen paralelo en el mundo de las minas, tanto a nivel global como en Colombia, pero por el otro lado pues estamos muy felices de que nos encontramos en el camino y de que tú vuelves a tu tierra, a tu casa, a tu herencia, a estar con tu perrito y a seguir creando cosas para que haya un mundo mejor. Te deseamos lo mejor desde el programa aquí en Colombia y sabes que cuentas con 69 almas para recordarte lo bonita que eres. ¡Feliz viaje!
Tami, debemos iniciar estas cortas palabras con un sentido de agradecimiento. Fuimos testigos de todo el esfuerzo, convicción y dedicación con los que te consagraste a nuestra misión. Hiciste de nuestro objetivo el tuyo propio y eso fue inspirador y motivante. Te deseamos el mejor camino en esta nueva era y que sea tan exitoso como todo lo que has emprendido hasta ahora. Tu apoyo para nosotros fue invaluable y aprender de tu experiencia un verdadero tesoro. Nos sentimos orgullosos de la labor de los últimos años y apreciamos la forma en la que dejaste nuestro nombre en alto. Gracias por el compromiso con nuestra causa y con nuestro país, por el liderazgo, por la calidez, por la sensatez y por la bondad. Que Dios recompense para ti y tu familia todo el tiempo y cariño que dedicaste en dejarnos lo mejor de ti.
Gracias, Tami. Qué bello, ¿no?
Muchísimas gracias.
Não, você merece todo isso. Bom, Tami, por fim, só podemos reafirmar, então, nosso muito obrigado pelo seu apoio, muito sucesso em sua próxima jornada. Já partindo para as despedidas e cientes do sucesso desse seminário, convidamos, então, a todos para que, por favor, acompanhar nossos próximos eventos, que se encontram disponíveis no site www.jid.org/eventos. Inicialmente, convidamos nosso público para acompanhar o exercício de assistência humanitária internacional, muito importante, MECODEX CMDA 2024, a ser desenvolvido na cidade de Lima, Peru, entre 31 de maio e 4 de junho, com a participação de 12 países e 3 organismos internacionais. Também destacamos o curso piloto de assessor de gênero em operações, com inscrições abertas até o dia 30 de maio e execução do curso entre 1 de junho e 31 de agosto. Por fim, reforçamos o convite para o terceiro Seminário de Segurança Marítima, que terá como tema as estratégias para a segurança marítima hemisférica frente aos impactos do câmbio climático. E ocorrerá esse evento das 9 horas da manhã até 1 hora da tarde do dia 6 de agosto de 2023. Não deixem, então, de acompanhar nossos eventos e mantenham-se sempre atualizados sobre as novidades e tendências da defesa e segurança hemisférica. Por fim, desejamos a todos uma excelente continuidade deste produtivo dia e apresentamos o nosso até breve. Muitas graças, thank you, muito obrigado.